Hey, everybody. Hope you had a fantastic, gluttonous Thanksgiving with friends and family and football and the same repetitive commercials and jingles that are stuck in your head as they have been for the previous 13 weeks. Welcome to another edition of Thinking Out Loud from the home studio here somewhere in Southern California. The sun actually came out today. My name is Andrew Siciliano. Great turkey, great friends, great everything, really, unless you're a Bears fan or a Dolphins fan or maybe a Giants fan. But if you're a Giants fan, you kind of knew this was coming, right? The inevitable. Drew Lock was not in any way a lock to get you back on track. And now you got to figure out why your owner said back in October that everybody was going to be back. I know you want continuity, but anyway, I digress. Again, thanks for subscribing and liking and sharing and doing whatever it is you do to watch and consume and share and somehow take part in this show. Hopefully we're building something. Hopefully you're along for the ride. We continue with the Week 13 games, the 5 games that mean the most for us, coming up shortly. But the news today, not surprisingly, is that, as we welcome in good friend Sam Patesh here, the Chicago Bears fired head coach Matt Eberflus, who is a very nice man. And I really do mean that. I've loved my time with him and his family over the years. It just necessarily was not meant to be. Great defensive coordinator, maybe a great linebacker coach, and maybe if given another head shot or another shot as a head coach, it might work somewhere else. But it simply, Sam, melted down over these last 6 weeks. And despite the fact that they showed some progress with Caleb Williams, and I think the last couple of weeks with Thomas Brown calling the plays, also as he takes over as interim head coach, it shows some progress. This simply had to be done. How they did it, we'll get to that in a second, probably leaves little to be desired.
You know, Andrew, your travel tips for the holiday, by the way, I thoroughly enjoyed those. A lot of people actually commented to me about those and telling people to, be aware when you're at the airport and just move on through. I think that'll be a tip I take from Thanksgiving all the way through and forever. So thank you for that. And certainly Matt Eberflus can now make sure that he is heeding your warning as well. But you're right. Yeah, that was an interesting finish for sure on Thursday.
Listen, the Bears also gave it an interesting finish. They should not have put him on the podium this morning. He looked like, it looked like he was held against his will on a Zoom for which the Bears didn't even send the link out to the local media until 2 minutes before its schedule time, like 9 a.m. local, 8:58. That's basically when they sent the link out to the media. So you had the local media wondering, is there going to be a Zoom? Is there going to be a presser? Is he still the head coach? And then Eberflus continually had to answer questions. Are you going to coach next week? Yes, I will. And then they had the meeting with the staff, and then they're preparing for the game, and they're about to leave at noon, according to reporting from Albert Breer. And then he got fired. It's just kind of a mess, much like the end of the game yesterday. Listen, there's nothing that I can say that we can say here that can somehow spin it differently or that hasn't been said already about the end of that game. We all agree the Bears mismanaged the clock at the end of that game, and they should have run at least one more play, at least attempted a 59-yard field goal, even though seemingly that was out of the range of the usually reliable Cairo Santos if the ball can get over the line of scrimmage and they don't have it blocked. But what Matt Eberflus didn't do, and I'm going to give him credit, and I'm going to be one of the few, is throw his rookie quarterback under the bus. Everyone says they should have used the timeout after the sack, and maybe you could argue that. That certainly would have put them in a better situation than this. But A, the play seemingly came in slowly from O.C. Thomas Brown, now the head coach. And B, Caleb Williams then changed the play at the line, eating up more time. So they should have gotten the playoff. But when Matt Eberflus, and here's where I think he truly dropped the ball, saw that they weren't getting the playoff at like 10, 9, 8, call timeout and just say to heck with it. We're going to bring the kicker out. Because right now, Cairo Santos, 4 yards beyond his career-long 59 there, is a better option than anything that's currently happening on the field before us. But Eberflus wasn't going to throw his rookie quarterback under the bus. He wasn't going to. When you heard the reaction from the locker room after the game, when the players were A, surprised that they didn't use the timeout, B, some were surprised they even had the timeout. I believe Keenan Allen suggested he didn't even know they had the timeout. See, obviously everybody was upset with the clock management, but no one wanted to throw the quarterback under the bus. And I don't think he deserves all the blame here. But clearly, an inexperienced quarterback could have handled it and should have handled it better. But it comes down to coaching. And in the end, the coaches need to guide that inexperienced quarterback. What I'm giving Eberflus credit for is not throwing the quarterback, Caleb Williams, under the bus. But Sam, that game aside, the Bears have lost 6 in a row, and 4 of those 6 are on the final play. You can't come back from that. And you can't come back from your locker room seemingly. It was a no confidence locker room after the game. And they're 2-13 in the division and 3-19 on the road. No coach survives that. None, regardless of how they mismanaged the end of the game, or regardless of how, honestly, the Bears mismanaged the clock as well the next morning when they fired Matt Eberflus. I like Thomas Brown. I really like him a lot. I really do. And I think he's going to make a very good head coach. I don't know if this is the best scenario, and I don't know what he can do, save for running the table and Caleb turning into Patrick Mahomes. Back when he used to throw for 300, that Patrick Mahomes. I don't know that he is going to win this job.
Andrew, and would he even, I mean, not to say would he want to, it's a great opportunity regardless. Of course, everyone who is not a head coach wants to then be the head coach, and this is that opportunity. And a lot of times you're thrust into this as an interim in what is not a tremendous situation, and that is certainly the case. But you and I spoke about this. That game against Jaden Daniels, against the Commanders, that really did it. I mean, when you look at this team since the bye week and you look at these losses, it really started with that Commanders loss. I mean, think about where this team is headed, looking potentially at the time at being right in the heart of what is going on in this division. There was a moment in time where we thought everyone from the NFC North was going to be viable for a playoff spot. And then now, remember, they actually came from behind to take the lead in that game. It looked as if they were going to win that game until the Hail Mary. And then after that, to let that spiral so out of control after that, where the Cardinals game is not competitive, the Patriots game is not competitive, the Packers game, you're lining up for a game-winning field goal. It doesn't happen. A furious comeback against the Vikings that ends in overtime the wrong way. And then, of course, everything that we just mentioned about that Lions game. The end of that game is obviously, it's inexcusable. It's interesting what you said about giving credit and not throwing Caleb. I thought what Caleb said after the game was actually a little confusing, if you will. I won't say throw under the bus, but Caleb said, that's above my pay grade. Essentially,
he was trying to
that's
change,
not my call.
I'm sorry to cut you off. He was trying to change the play at the line that seemingly was slow to get in, and then they couldn't get lined up. Look, you could argue, like I said, call the timeout after the sack. Okay. That's fine. I get that too. But when you see your rookie quarterback clearly isn't getting the job done, that's when you call timeout and just say, okay, we failed here. Let's kick.
And he was very clear in his post game on Thursday night that at 12 seconds, he knew, all right, we're not going to have enough time. We're not going to have enough time to do. So that at that point, timeout. Right at that point, the 12 seconds becomes timeout. So at least we can regroup. We can discuss the field goal. We can discuss something that Romo on the broadcast loves to point out, which is here's where you can get 5 easy yards, right? Let's run a quick out, get the 5 yards to at least put us in a little different spot. In fact, Romo on the Hail Mary game against the Bears had pointed out that if Jaden Daniels here can get about 8 yards on a curl route, which will put him in a better spot for the Hail Mary. And yes, it did unfold that way, but same could have been there for Caleb. And I understand third down puts more pressure on it, but wow, losing that game with the timeout is just awful. And what you said about the locker room, I'm sure sunk the entire thing that much further. But it was, I was still, I was stunned on Friday. I was stunned that it was that quick. I was that it happened that quick. I thought the decision could be made, and maybe it was because Chicago to this point had not fired a coach mid-season, and it just felt like one of those things. Perhaps this would survive. And the other thing that just I couldn't help get out of my mind. Forget about when we heard so much about Madden over the last few days. Forget about the Madden curse, the Hard Knocks thing, which you and I discussed regarding the Giants and whether teams would want to do this. Call it a Hard Knocks curse, if you will, but Hard Knocks training camp now has your OC and your head coach fired, and Hard Knocks offseason has your quarterback cut released on waivers, etc., and everything in shambles while you're watching the player that you let go to your division rival lead the MVP race. I mean, it's been a rough one for those two teams that participated. That's for sure.
If you listen to the post-game locker room, there's no way he can coach again. He couldn't coach next week against the 49ers. You hate to do it on Black Friday as opposed to what we used to call Black Monday, the Monday after the end of the regular season. But as a good friend once said, if it's inevitable, make it immediate. And it was clearly obvious that this was inevitable, and the Bears made it, honestly, not as immediate as they should have. You should not have run him out there for the podium. You just shouldn't have. He's a good man. He lost his job as head coach. There's no need to have him go out there. I honestly I thought to myself when he was on his way to the podium, well, maybe he's going to resign. Nah, financially, you don't do that. You don't resign. I was stunned. Just the way the day unfolded. Again, not that he's out, but how the morning unfolded. Not a great look. Bears 5-19 under Matt Eberflus in one-score games. Not a way to win. Not a good way to win. All right, let's get to after the Chiefs beat the Raiders on a stupefying play and sequence at the end of the game that seemed a little bit like the Bears-Lions game. Let's get to the 5 games, Sam, that mean the most to us for the remainder of week number 5. And we begin with that one at the top left corner of the Arizona Cardinals on the road against the 9-2 Minnesota Vikings, who are right now the 5 seed in the NFC, and the Cardinals are the 8 seed in the NFC. Remember, the Packers beat the Dolphins on Thanksgiving night, so the Vikings have to win to stay ahead of the Packers. Also remember that the Vikings have already lost to the Lions. They face them again week 18, but the idea of Minnesota catching Detroit does not seem likely. But with 3 teams that have at least 9 wins in that division, you never, ever say never. Vikings have won 4 straight. We've spent the majority of this week talking about Daniel Jones, whose signing didn't even become official until Friday afternoon. He's really not part of this story here at all. Sam Darnold is the quarterback, and Sam Darnold is the quarterback for a team that blitzes the heck out of the opposition. And Kyler Murray, the other quarterback, this year not good against the blitz. Just no other way to say it. And while James Conner has been very good, last week against Seattle, the Cardinals couldn't run the ball, and the Vikings do have the best run defense in football. I guess what I'm getting at is after Justin Jefferson had only 1 catch in regulation last week, this seems, for my money, to be a week where the Vikings watch what the Packers did, the Vikings watch what the Lions did, and the Vikings meet the challenge at home against a good team, but not a very good team. A team that on paper they are far better than. Now, can Kyler run around and do the whirly bird stuff and make amazing plays and pull a win out? Sure, absolutely. But on paper, Sam, this one to me feels like a not a double-digit scoreboard win, but a win to get the Vikings to double digits.
Yeah, and what you said is interesting about the division itself and watching the other teams, and of course with Detroit on the tear that they're on, and Minnesota very much in that game with Detroit. I mean, that game came down to the wire, and in the end, yes, Detroit pulled that out, but that was one of the best games of the season to this point in regards to 2 heavyweights going at it and playing it down to the wire. But Minnesota, since there's something that happened. I mean, the Jacksonville game was questionable, and Darnold threw red zone interceptions in that game against Jacksonville. Yet finding a way to win in those ugly situations is important. Just ask the Chiefs. Obviously, they're not going to ask how, but how many at the end, and that's what matters for the Vikings is keeping pace here. There was something the Cardinals have shown all season, though, and McBride has been so special at tight end. I mean, overall for 2 seasons he has been, but he was special last week in an ugly loss to Seattle. And Arizona's defense got after Geno Smith 5 times. This will be the key to that game. I actually think the Cardinals can find a way. I think the Cardinals will find a way to win this game on the road. The defense got after Geno Smith, as mentioned. McBride was incredibly unique at that tight end spot, and he has been for Carly. He's been such a good outlet for him. Perhaps we see more from Marvin Harrison in this game. I'd like to see it. There's something from Minnesota just seems to be, Minnesota's not quite at the clip they were, and no one holds that steady through 17 games regardless. It's not going to happen. What you said is right, perhaps on paper, but Arizona has shown flashes of being this team that is serious about making a dent in the NFC West, the division that nobody seemingly wants to win. But I get it. The Vikings, of course, they want to keep pace. Everybody does. But I see Arizona saying, you know what? That was a winnable game against Seattle in the division that seemingly they needed that game to really take hold in the division. Did not happen, obviously. And Seattle looked the better team. Although, as I said, the Arizona defense was a difference in that game. It just in the offense did nothing at all when it came to the red zone. If they can find a way in the red zone, that's how I see this one. Arizona eking this out.
You meant to say Kyler and you said Carly, which I think is funny. So he's a gamer. So we can call him. Hold on. We can call him Kyler now. He's not iCarly. He's Kyler.
I said Carly.
You did. It's
That's
okay.
so good.
I find it funny.
That's so good.
I didn't correct you. I'm not going to jump in. It was. I've heard it both ways. Carly, Kyler.
I've now heard it both ways.
No, it's great. It's fantastic. All right. I think I went to Passover. There was a Carly at this year. Anyways, I digress. All right, so we disagree on that one. We got the Chargers and the Falcons, another game that means something to us. The Chargers are 7-4. The Falcons are 6-5. Both these teams in their respective conference playoff thingies. The Chargers are the 6th seed in the AFC wild card. The Cardinals lead the NFC South. I'm sorry, the Falcons lead the NFC South. They are the 4th seed. Honestly, I don't think either of these teams are that good. I don't know that either of these teams are going to win a playoff game. They both could. I don't know that the Chargers honestly get in, but I think they do squeeze in. Again, the bottom of the AFC, look at what the Dolphins did on Thursday night. Not that good. The Chargers had won 4 in a row. They lost to the Ravens. Really got physically dominated. Maybe that's extreme, but they lost to what was clearly a better team on Monday night here in LA. It was the first time they had lost since week 7. They have that thing going here. The Falcons, meantime, they have lost 2 in a row after their bye. But remember, they swept the Bucs in their game up on the Bucs. So whatever the standings say, they already have the sweep in hand. The Falcons would have to really collapse to lose the NFC South. I don't think they're a wild card team. They're going to get in as the division winner here. The Chargers really haven't beaten anybody. They have lost 4 out of 5 against teams that currently have a winning record. Against teams that are currently under 500, they're perfect. They're 6-0. So they're well coached, and they have a quarterback who's a golden god. But without J.K. Dobbins, their run game isn't nearly as good as it should be. Quentin Johnston is, kind of the Quentin Johnston we thought he was a year ago. I know he's made strides, and I like the kid, and I'm rooting for him. That game was tough to watch. He'll bounce back, right? I know he will. And maybe it'll happen this week because the Falcons are allowing opposing quarterbacks to complete like 3 out of every 4 passes. It's nearly 72% that opposing quarterbacks can complete. So, look, these are 2 teams that I think are similar in that they're winning and they're going to make the playoffs in all likelihood, but they're not that good. But they're just built very differently. Very different. The Falcons are bottom of the league and like bottom quarter, bottom 10 in most major defensive categories. But they're at home. I think Kirk Cousins against zone. I think this matchup works. I think the Chargers are going to have to dial up some pressure, which is not necessarily their MO. And I think Kirk Cousins at home here wins it. But I don't have a lot of confidence in this one. I'm going to be very curious, Sam, how Jim Harbaugh gets his team ready on a short week on the road after a truly dispiriting loss on Monday night.
I'd be stunned if both predictions that I have here for these road teams turns out okay, because again, I'm not as convicted, just like you said, when it comes to me saying that the Cardinals could win that game in Minnesota. Yes, of course it could happen. Chargers winning in Atlanta. I love what the Chargers are doing defensively. And even though Baltimore scored 30 as they did on Monday night, the Chargers are still looking at that number 1 overall scoring defense with what they've done, points per game, that is. And there is something about that game. Had they not lost J.K. Dobbins in that Monday night loss to the Ravens, it felt like the Chargers were building towards something. That was clearly one of those tier games where the Ravens are in another tier.
Yep.
The Chargers just aren't quite there yet, right? And you've said it. We both know the Chargers aren't quite there. I'm holding on tightly to this idea that I said the Chargers would be a playoff team. They very well could
they could
be.
very well be.
They very well could be. You're right. It doesn't feel like a team that's going to beat the Bills and Chiefs, which is what it would take to make a spectacular season for the Chargers, right? In the playoffs, they would have to beat two really special teams. That's not going.
I don't think
it's not going to
happen either.
Right. Exactly. Now, could they upset? Could they upset a team in the playoffs? Yes, could happen, of course. But this Atlanta team, something isn't right. That Denver game was ugly. This feels like a get right game for the Falcons, but the league doesn't much care that you're on a losing streak or need to get it right. To me, maybe it comes down to coaching, as you said, with what you think of Harbaugh. That's where I see the Chargers here. And again, the Dobbins thing is a really big difference here. I think now maybe Herbert knows what he does or doesn't have. This could be a get right game for Quentin Johnson, but that was, you said it.
Yeah.
It really could be. And he's the kind of guy that can turn it on and be electric. That's what's so maddening about watching Quentin Johnston is that he has games where he can be the guy, but then when he is the guy and you're throwing it to him and he's dropping it in the most crucial situations of a game, you can't have that. That's not a number one receiver, clearly. But Herbert probably knows that. Harbaugh's done a lot to the offense to make it not all about Herbert. And this could be one of those games where the Chargers are saying this is part of the different makeup of this team is to win a game like this against what we now consider to be this on paper would be the best Chargers win, right? I mean, they just simply have not, right?
They don't beat anyone with a winning record.
And as you said, the Falcons are probably the perfect recipe when it comes to saying this is a good team, but the reality is it's not a good, scary team. It's a quote unquote, it's an air quote, good team. Yeah. So this feels to me like the one the Chargers will hang their hat on and say, but we beat the Falcons. We beat the Falcons. That's what it feels like. That's what it feels like when I see this. This is that game where the Chargers are saying, no. Yeah, we lost the Ravens, but we can play with the big boys, even though you and I know the Falcons aren't really big boys.
Yeah, the Falcons are going to win the NFC South. They have no pass rush, and the Chargers have a couple of good tackles. They won't touch Justin Herbert, who has not been picked off, by the way, since week 2. J.C. Horn got him, so the only Justin Herbert pick this year has been in the NFC South. The Falcons won't get him. It's do you believe in Cousins putting up enough yards and hitting all his weapons to put up enough points to win this game? I'm going to say yes for now. But I don't have a lot of conviction on this one. We're going to bounce around. Let's get to the Ravens and the Eagles here. This is clearly the game of the year of the week, and it could be a Super Bowl preview, but I don't think it is because I don't think the Ravens defense is good enough for them to make the postseason. I'm sorry, to make the Super Bowl and make it to New Orleans. But when you have Lamar Jackson, who is trying to do something that has never been done to the Super Bowl era, and I'll tell you that in a second, then, you can win any game. It's the number one total offense against the number one total defense. Here's a hint. The Ravens don't have the number one total defense. Lamar leads the league in passing, most passing yards. He also has the most rushing yards among quarterbacks at 599, more than Jalen Hurts, more than Bo Nix, more than Josh Allen. And now here's the stat, or here's the note. No quarterback in the Super Bowl era. So that means this is the 59th year. No quarterback in the Super Bowl era has led the league in passing yards and passing touchdowns and rush yards for a quarterback. It's never been done. Lamar has a good shot at doing it. Joe Burrow also has 27 touchdowns, so it's not as if he's running away with that number. And anybody can pass him when it comes to the yardage. They're a run-first football team. But Lamar is doing something that is, in essence, unprecedented. Also, pretty good. The fact that Derrick Henry and Saquon Barkley are 1 and 2 in rushing yards. It's the other way around, Saquon and Derrick Henry. Look, Eagles have won 7 in a row. That's big. We both saw, Sam, the Eagles up close and personal last week. I do think now that Malcolm Rodriguez is out, for example, as the Lions, their injuries mount and the Eagles try to get healthy, although Then Sumanen got hurt today in practice, so that's a big, negative. It's a backup linebacker and a fullback or whatever. But regardless, I do think the Eagles can't beat the Lions. I firmly do believe that now. I think this one for the Ravens, considering it's at home and that they have a bye next week, I'm going with the home team here, even though the Eagles are by far a more well-rounded team.
You're right about that, right? When you just stack up the rosters here and perhaps what we've seen throughout the season from a consistency standpoint, and of course, since that Eagles bye week, yeah, sure. What you said is right about the Eagles. But a couple of things. How much does this number matter? 23-1, what Lamar has done against the NFC. Now,
it doesn't
it's not as it, right? I mean, it's really one of those coincidental, right? It's one of those coincidental numbers.
No,
right?
I think it's more than a coincidence. I think NFC teams that have never seen it before are not used to him. But I don't think in this game with this quality an opponent, it matters.
True. But I do want to remind everyone that last year, two of those NFC opponents that Lamar beat as part of his 23-1 were the Lions handily and the Niners handily. And late in the season, mid-season Lions, late season Christmas game against the Niners. This could be that. This could be a real wake-up game for the Eagles. We've talked about a lot of teams facing their greatest opponent at some point. This is the Eagles' most severe opponent of the season. This will be the best team that they play all season. This will be the toughest, the fact that it's on the road, etc. Last season, Brock Purdy was the MVP favorite in that game at Christmas and was picked off 4 times by the Ravens. And that was really the game that launched Lamar Jackson's MVP. That was the game that was the separator right there, where the Ravens, and again, that was one of those Super Bowl preview, as you say, games. And the Ravens, it wasn't competitive. In San Francisco, Brock looked ugly early and often in that game. That could happen here, although, ironically, it's the Eagles that have that number one defense this time around. But this is one of those sort of MVP bowls also, right? You've got Saquon. We've said it here, could be an MVP candidate. We've talked, you were the one who pointed out how the fact that Derrick Henry and Lamar on the same team are MVP candidates. So this is going to be one of those spicy games where we see all these players going into it who could be the MVP. Secretly, by the way, one thing we never said, I think Goff could actually end up winning the MVP, by the way. Just throwing it out there, of course. But that's spicy in this game, certainly. But if the Ravens had lost to the Chargers on Monday, I would have said there's no way the Ravens lose this game. No way. I just think 3 in a row for the Ravens, it just would not happen. There'd be too much riding on this game just from a keeping up with the Joneses standpoint, from staying in the division the way that they want to be. I do think this game will live up to the hype. I don't think it'll be like that Niners game. I think this game will live up to the hype in that we will have back and forth. Both offenses can start sluggish. Really, these teams both have looked ugly in the first quarter. Monday night, the Ravens it looked like the Chargers were going to win that game. Not to say handily, but the Ravens could not do anything in the first quarter of that Monday night game against the Chargers and then turned it on very much so. The Eagles hadn't scored any points through 8 weeks in the first quarter. I mean, it was bad. They couldn't at all. So we'll see which offense comes alive first, but both of these offenses can get on track. And the Eagles have been the better team here at waiting it out and letting their run game lean on the opponent. Ironically, even though the Ravens seemingly have that better run game, but with Saquon, what they did against the Commanders and what they did against the Rams, it was very much second half imposing our will. And one other name that I know you were trying to get to when you were talking about injuries, Brandon Graham for the Eagles.
Out for this.
That was the big one So as you talk about the Eagles having a crack at the Lions, they both kind of lost a significant piece of the defense, obviously in Hutchinson for the Lions and then Brandon Graham, more heart and soul Graham than he's not. I mean, he was their best player against the Rams, but he's not their best defender. Probably Jalen Carter would be that. But regardless, I'll say, Andrew, I'd love to with my heart say I really see the Eagles winning this game. But if I were really, really in Vegas with cash on it, I think the Ravens, this looks like just saying the home team perhaps. And I just feel like with what Lamar has done to the NFC, this is his game. This is his game.
I'm glad I'm not allowed to bet because I would never want to place a bet. So
the
Lions did get Quan Alexander, beg your pardon, who Aaron Glenn had in New Orleans off the Broncos practice squad Friday morning. So he fills the Malcolm Rodriguez role, as he had already had 3 elevations off the practice squad in Denver. So the Lions just flat out signed him, which they can do. You can sign anyone off anyone's practice squad as long as you put them on the active roster. All right, 2 more to go. Let's get to the game in Cincinnati, where the Bengals are 4-7. They are the 10 seed right now, meaning they're out of the playoff picture in the AFC. And the 8-3 Steelers come to town, well rested after the Snow Globe game last Thursday, as the 3 seed. And again, they are 8-3. The Steelers' remaining schedule is absolutely comically ridiculous. They have 4 AFC North games left. They're 1-1 right now in the AFC North. They beat the Ravens. They lost to the Browns. And then they have to go also within that 4 games. So it's 6 games, 4 of those. And then they are at Philadelphia and they host Kansas City. Other than that, cakewalk. Yeah. So those are their remaining 6 games. Joe Burrow is tied with Lamar for that touchdown number. And again, we'll say this. I've said it for months. Joe Burrow is the best quarterback on a bad team in recent NFL history. Only Drew Brees and Joe Montana have ever led the NFL in touchdown passes on teams with losing record. Joe Burrow might do it. He's tied for the lead right now. Drew Brees, Joe Montana, great company, but it's not something you want to do. And Montana was in the 82 strike season, so throw that out if you don't think that should count. So that's how bad the Bengals are. Their defense, not good, but lucky for the Bengals defense, they are playing a Steelers offense that is not good. You could argue, and I saw them up close last week, Najee Harris running the ball well, Jalen Warren running the ball well. George Pickens really good when he's paying attention to what else is happening with the other 21 players on the field at that moment. The Steelers have the worst, let's call it, scoring offense of any good team, of any playoff team. Russell Wilson's playing great, and I have the utmost respect for him. I always did. Yeah, whatever happened in Denver happened, and he certainly took some slings and arrows and a lot of snark from people. Remember, snark is not analysis. The Russell Wilson I saw last Thursday got the you-know-what kicked out of him, and he kept getting up. Final play of the game, Jordan Hicks destroyed him. It was a car crash. Car crash. He got up. He kept getting up. Myles Garrett sacked him 3 times in the first half. He kept getting up. Dalvin Tomlinson had 10 pressures, most for any interior defensive lineman in any game this year. He kept getting up. Crazy respect for Russell, but they're not good in the red zone and they're not scoring points. And for them to go deep in the postseason, another defense is great. Something's got to change. Maybe it changes this week. I think the Bengals need this game more, and I think the Bengals win this game. I really do. I hate the need it more deciding factor because that's lazy analysis. But I do think it actually matters in this case with the Hard Knocks cameras rolling. I didn't know who I was going to pick until we started having this conversation, but I have just now talked myself in, and I'm going to regret it, to the Bengals.
And you are on the same page on this one, Andrew. Also, the Bengals off a bye. That's just another piece of this. Is there a team with a more surprising record on a negative note than the Bengals, judging by the numbers this season? No, in other words, production that the team has put forward, and therefore wins that you're getting in
their
return.
Defense isn't good,
but their offense is so good. I mean, to say
everybody though.
Arguably best quarterback season belongs to Joe Burrow when it comes to yardage, and arguably best receiver season belongs to Jamar Chase, yardage standpoint. Both are leading in those categories, and 4 wins. It doesn't make sense. And we could sit here and continue to talk to each other about the fact that the Bengals are going to make the playoffs, but you laid it out very beautifully. Yeah, good luck with what's ahead. Good luck with that. Cincinnati sort of blew what we would be considered the easy part of their schedule. Mm-hmm. This team was getting right at the wrong time. And yes, Burrow looks very much over that injury. And early in the season, we did not say that. I mean, this season started ugly. The loss
to New England. He himself said this week, it remains to be seen how his wrist holds up in cold weather. It's going to be cold up and down the East Coast. So, I mean, that could be a factor.
And we've seen him again in that week 1 game, right? We saw him. There was something going on with his hand, and he was trying to work it out. And we all thought through even 2 weeks, okay, something's not right. What's up with Burrow? But then you look down on paper and what he's done numbers wise, this has been unreal. But you're right. In shootout games, we all remember the Monday night game against Washington where Jaden Daniels, outdueled Burrow, let's say. You're right. You can't win that way. You can't win that way each week throughout 17 games. It's not going to happen. But I will say, like you, in this divisional game in which neither one of us think that the Steelers are running away with that division, this is a game the Bengals are going to have. The Bengals have been in some close games, in some heartbreak games. And frankly, if McPherson made kicks, they win the game against the Chargers. If McPherson makes kicks, they win the game against the Chargers. And even just one win, as we know, can be a completely different season. And by the way, both heartbreaking losses to the Ravens, obviously. Mm-hmm. The ugly 2-point conversion that went nowhere, and the botched snap in overtime they could have won either and probably both of those games against the Ravens. And it is a completely different season for Cincinnati had those gone another way. They didn't. It's 4 wins, but you and I see this the same way.
Yeah. I don't want to say I feel for Joe Burrow. I mean, look, you got 32 teams. A lot of teams get injured. A lot of great performances are wasted. But a great performance right now is getting wasted. Finally, this game, the final one on our board here, 5 matchups that matter the most to us. This game could have been a Super Bowl preview. There is no way on God's green earth that the Niners in Buffalo, where they expect in Buffalo 2 feet of snow between now when we're recording this Friday and kickoff on Sunday. The snow should be over, but they could get 2 to 3 feet of snow in some parts. There is no way that this is going to be a Super Bowl preview. As a matter of fact, I will shovel your driveway if the 49ers find a way to win this game.
Watch it, Andrew.
No. This is, I never thought that I would look at this on paper and say it's a one-sided game. Now, it's not the Chiefs and the Raiders, what Antonio Pierce called the worst team in football against the best team in football. It's not that. And we could see how that went, right? You had a rookie snapping the ball too quickly because the second-year quarterback was clapping when he shouldn't have been clapping. And the Raiders almost beat the Chiefs. But I'm sorry. I just cannot see. I cannot see the 49ers winning this game. Brock Purdy's questionable. Trent Williams is out. Nick Bosa is out. And I'm going to give you one note here. One note to tell you why the Niners can't win this game. I'm not going to give you, offensive stats or defensive stats. Or by now that with the Dolphins losing, if the Bills win this game, they win the division. It'll be the earliest 13 games division title in the last 15 years of the National Football League. No one has won a division after 13 games since Peyton Manning and the Colts did it in 2009. Okay, this is all that matters here. The 49ers will be playing their 9th game in the last 2 years against a team coming off a bye. 9 games. It's not necessarily fair. The Rams, by the way, have a really high number of those as well. They're playing one again this week against the Saints in New Orleans, a team coming off a bye. The Niners were in Green Bay last week. They lost, beaten up, kind of out physical, went home. Now they got to go to Buffalo in the snow against a well-rested, superior team coming off a bye with a chance to win the division. No way the Niners win this game. That's it. It's the bye note. Can't take them. No way.
4th ranked offense and 4th ranked defense for the Niners. We talk so often about balanced teams, and we want the Niners in that conversation, right? For some reason, I can't seem to look past it. You're quicker to these things than I am. Clearly, you have been. Dallas, you were off quick, and of course, it unraveled beyond that with injuries. Niners, you simply said you were high on the Lions probably 3 weeks ago, and you just said not going to happen for the Niners. And I remember I said, we just can't talk about the Niners until McCaffrey's back. We just can't quite look at them and see. We don't know exactly what they are yet. And then Geno beat them.
He's not the same guy.
No. Hasn't found the end zone yet either.
But
there's something,
his
right?
GPS numbers, by the way, his fastest GPS number, I believe so far, he has yet to hit his slowest. Okay, rephrase. So if you take all his GPS numbers, how fast he was on the field last year, his slowest game last year, he has yet to hit even his slowest game last year. That makes sense?
Yeah, it
It's
does.
not the same.
It does. And Mason was giving a lot. I mean, a lot of teams find spark in another running back.
Alexa, shut up.
It does happen. And Alexa, we appreciate that. She's trying to fill in when we can't think of something. But Mason gave this team a lot in McCaffrey's absence. But I wanted to, and a lot of people wanted to say, we're not going to judge the Niners until they are quote unquote healthy. Now, we can argue what healthy is, because guess what? And you said, by the way, Bosa and Williams, is that a big deal? That's a big deal. I mean, no Williams, no Bosa.
Same.
Debo's no Ayuk, by the way. So I mean, this is essentially like talking about. I mean, if you're talking about the Bucs and saying they're not the same without Godwin, Ayuk is that equation for the Niners, and it makes Debo a different player without Ayuk as well. And what you're getting out of Juwan Jennings has been nice, but when that's icing on the cake, that's one thing. When he's got to be one of the guys, it's not going to happen. Kittle, when healthy, is still as dominant, but probably McCaffrey's that difference. And you know what the other thing is? Purdy. It's been talked about with Purdy that perhaps, and I understand he wasn't part of the 38-10 loss to Green Bay, obviously, but Purdy was somebody that maybe if the league got tape on him, things would change. And perhaps we're getting in that direction where Purdy is a very good quarterback, but he wasn't going to be undefeated as he was in all of those starts to begin his career as he was. And maybe the league is catching up a little bit to that. I see this as a Niners wanting to say this game is, we're with the big boys. This is our big swing. This is a Super Bowl preview. Don't forget about us. But I don't see a way.
No way.
Not in Buffalo, right? Not in Buffalo.
Buffalo can win the division at home in the snow.
It's going to happen.
I mean, on Sunday night.
It's going to happen.
I mean, as somebody once said, I mean, this is a lock of all locks for recreational purposes only. I don't do that.
But I mean, if we were saying what are we most confident of all the things we've said, things we've said this evening, that's probably the one that we're most certain of, is that the Niners are really somewhat of a shadow of what we thought they were.
All right. Two things. Number one, Georgia and Georgia Tech are in 6 overtimes. And number two, I'm going to go eat dinner. So I thank you for watching and listening and subscribing. We thank you for listening and watching and subscribing. This is the Thinking Out Loud podcast. Enjoy week 13, friends. Please drive safely, and please don't overshop. For Sam Batesh, I'm Andrew Siciliano. So long, everybody.